All right, back again. It's Wednesday night this time, not Monday. Appreciate you guys who tune in every single time. I am blown away by how many people watch consistently on here and continue to support the channel. Thank you for taking the time out and having, caring what I have to say. It is really humbling. I feel really blessed to be in a position to talk about the things that I really enjoy and, I think are cool, and apparently other people think they're cool too. So we'll get going. I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight. We've had a lot of people ask about LLCs and a lot of different questions. So I'm going to run down like exactly how we structure that, because I haven't done that in a while. Because we have a lot of people that want to do it. They want to do it the right way. They want to make sure that it's, set up for success, post price appreciation, and even before then. But they have a lot of questions, and maybe you don't have the $2,000 to work with us on it. So I'm going to give you the full rundown, end to end, on how to do each piece of it. Obviously, if you work with us, are you bringing the tea in here? What are you doing?
Yeah, probably.
Oh. Ooh, thank you. Appreciate it. My wife is wonderful with the tea. Different cup tonight, not Bluey. So we're going to get into that, run through the LLC, why we do it the way that we do it, how to mitigate taxes, move stuff in there, and then we'll jump into the questions and run it down, and we'll talk about all the macro and all the fun stuff that's going on, and what might be on the imminent horizon here with the Bank of Japan raising interest rates. So, just to kind of start off with, why would you even want an LLC to manage your crypto? Well, there's a couple reasons. If you have more than $50,000-$80,000, you probably want to protect it, right? Like if you got sued personally, and you never know what's going to happen. Your kid could rear end somebody, you could rear end somebody could fall on your property, especially as, things they will appreciate here. You're going to become more of a target for this stuff. And there's a couple other reasons. If you have a long-standing bank account for your business and you are taking large amounts of profit, it's probably not going to get frozen. You're not going to get flagged. You're not going to have issues. If you have, just set up an LLC post price appreciation and you move a large amount of money in there, as long as you're having the conversation with the bank beforehand, you're probably still going to be okay. If you're moving a large amount of money from a crypto exchange to your personal account and you haven't ever had, 6-7 figures move through your account before, they are going to flag it. They might even debank you, and they will hold that money for weeks until they send you a check. I've had it happen. So just be aware of that, right? Like the business piece, if you have a holding company that manages alternative investments, which is the way we structure it, if you talk to a lot of CPAs or attorneys out there, they're going to tell you to structure a trading company. And that's great if you're an actual trader. Okay, so if you're trading crypto on a pretty regular basis, doing more than 20, 25 trades a year, probably makes sense to set up a trading org, right? But if you're a long-term holder and you want to use the assets to generate income or borrow against them, like our clients do at Digital Wealth Partners, then a holding company makes more sense. And here's the difference. A trading company, you're going to not be taxed on every single transaction, which is great, but it's always short-term capital gains. You never get the benefit of long-term capital gains if you structure it as a trading company. If you structure it as a holding company, and again, you're not making that many trades, you're going to get the benefit of long-term capital gains. So if you've invested in this asset class for more than a year, specifically here in the US, other jurisdictions have different timeframes and amounts of taxes that you're going to owe, but 15 to 20% on the tax rate. And I'm hopeful, just like everybody else, that there's no taxes on crypto, right? Like I will be elated if that takes place, but I got to live in the paradigm and the rules of the road that exist today. So, and you might say, okay, well, if it's just for taxes, I don't need it. Well, like we talked about before when we first started, creditor protection is a big deal. You want to make sure that you have anonymity when you're participating in things. You can still pay yourself out of the LLC. You still control the assets. You get passed through taxation through an LLC. You can file as an S-Corp. You do have to pay yourself a reasonable salary once it starts producing revenue. And that's somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 a year is what you have to pay W-2 taxes on for self-employment tax. Anything else above that can be paid out as dividends out of the corporation. You need that structured in your operating agreement the right way. Make sure you have provisions on what cadence you're going to be taking money out of the company, how that works if you have other minority owners on the cap table, blah, blah, blah. You should work with an attorney to structure, your operating agreement. The other thing I would say about the operating agreement that we do very different than other people is we have specific considerations and language around digital assets in the operating agreement, the security of it, governance around it, the legal component there in Wyoming. There's legislation that's very beneficial for digital assets. All of that's curated in the language that we have as one of the verticals that you can invest in when it comes to this LLC that manages alternative investments. The other reason we structure it that way and not as a holding company that manages crypto is when you go to set up a bank account and you say, hey, this is my company to manage my crypto, they're not going to set up your bank account. It's not going to matter where you go. If you say this is a holding company that I use to invest in alternative assets, that could be real estate, could be private equity, could be private credit, other things, gold, silver, they'll be like, oh, okay, sure. What's the NAICS code? And you'll tell them 551112 or 551114. They'll look it up. They'll see that it's a holding company. They're going to be good to go. If you tell them it's a crypto trading company, probably not going to set you up an account. You're going to have to work with a specific bank or an exchange or somebody like that. So again, we've come to all of these things in our quest for the best outcome. And we've structured this a specific way for that. A lot of people also ask, if I move my assets into the LLC, is there tax implications? And there can be if you set up a partnership. So a lot of people want their spouse on the LLC, which is completely understandable, right? There are 15 states that have a qualified joint venture or a QJV. And if you're in one of those 15 states, you can use that exemption between you and your spouse to set up a partnership and still move the assets in there with no tax implications. If you're not in one of those states, one of the spouses is going to set up a single member LLC. This is a disregarded entity, and they are going to use the assets as a capital contribution to start the business. The way that we do that is you will write down the wallet, the amount of the asset name, XRP, XLM, Bitcoin, whatever you're putting in there, and the dollar amount that you bought it at. So we used to talk about, the day of the transfer, writing that amount down. We've worked with our CPAs, and this again, like it's an iterative process. We're always improving it. If you can write down the basis, that's the value that you're transferring in. So even if it's at a higher value or a different value than what you originally purchased it at, you're going to write down the basis value in your operating agreement on the capital contributions page. That tends to be like the Schedule 3 in your operating agreement toward the end of it. And that's where you're going to list the wallet again, the asset, the amount of the asset, and your cost basis or whatever amount of money it was worth when you bought it. So if you do all those things, you structure it the right way, you're going to get creditor protection in Wyoming. A lot of people will say, well, why don't I set up one in Arizona or the state that I reside in? Most people don't know that you can use a registered agent in another state as the address for your LLC to get the benefits of that state, especially if you're not going to be doing business in your own state. Okay, so this is kind of an online distributed ecosystem, crypto, right? Now, if you're buying real estate, you're going to be stuck in whatever state it's in. It's very difficult to, use Alaska law precedent for real estate, which is actually very favorable for a property in Texas. They're going to pull it into that jurisdiction. They're going to be like, it's on our dirt. This is what it is. With crypto, it's not that way. So you can really set things up to your benefit. And if you're here domestic in the US, Wyoming is the best jurisdiction when it comes to regulation around crypto. So we structure it there. You're also going to get fantastic creditor protection in Wyoming. You get charging order protection, which was adopted from Nevada. And it's almost second to none. There's really not a whole lot of states where you're going to get that strong of creditor protection. The other thing about Wyoming is there's no state tax. This person says, I'm in California. Can I stake my crypto in other states since California won't allow me to? Yes. So this is the other thing, like people are in New York or they're in California or they're in a state that has some cumbersome laws around what you can do with your crypto. If you've moved it into a Wyoming LLC, you're going to get all those freedoms that exist there in that state. When you go to set up, exchange, there's still going to be a look through to the beneficial owner on this stuff. Some exchanges are still going to be kind of wonky. If you live in New York and you have a Wyoming LLC and you give them a New York ID, in that situation, you might get a Palau ID. I've seen a lot of people do that in order to be able to kind of get around that. But the registered agent there in Wyoming is going to provide you anonymity for your address. The other thing that you get in Wyoming that you get in Delaware and South Dakota and Nevada is attorney-client privilege. So the attorney's information, their name, and all of that is going to be on the LLC publicly. So nobody's going to know that you own it. Nobody's going to know your address. If they look it up, they're not going to be able to tell that you're even associated at all with this entity that's been filed in Wyoming. So if you're looking for, anonymity, you're looking for creditor protection, you're looking for best tax rate, and for a while we thought that you were going to need to file reciprocity with, states like California or New York. You don't have to, because you're not doing physical business in those states using that LLC. So you don't have to file the reciprocity, and you're not going to owe the state taxes. I can't tell you that for sure. You're going to have to work with your CPA. This is just, again, we work with CPAs, and this is the feedback I've gotten from them. So, I can't give you tax advice, and this is probably a good time for my disclaimer. Nothing here is for financial advice, legal advice, tax advice. You should always speak with a financial advisor, a CPA, or an attorney before making any tax, legal, or financial decisions. The opinions I share here are my experiences. They are not the opinions of Digital Ascension Group or Digital Wealth Partners. But I've learned a lot of this through the grapevine and trial and error, and I want to share everything that I can with you guys to make sure that you know at least the questions to ask these other professionals if you are going to work with somebody else. And again, I encourage that. Like, shop it around, see where the best rate is. Not everybody has all the money in the world to spend on this stuff. We've done more than anybody else. We've done over 8,000 LLCs structured specifically this way. And like I said, we've worked through all the kinks, and we have it streamlined, and it's great. But you may want to go direct with your attorney, or you may want to go seek other people out in Wyoming and have some conversations. Do all that. I will say, for the price that we charge, the other benefit to working with us is we're going to provide you a banking memorandum. We're going to give you a certificate of good standing. We're going to keep up the corporate filings there in the state. And we do corporate veil also. So a lot of people, this is most people actually, they will commingle assets. They will pay for personal things out of their business, and vice versa, pay for business things out of their personal accounts. I'm just as guilty as other people, in my past. We're a lot better about it now. But all that being said, you want to have segregated accounts, right? Like, so you want to set up exchange accounts in the name of the LLC. You can migrate your personal account over there. All of that is great, and then that helps you maintain the corporate veil, because that's what provides you the creditor protection there in Wyoming. If you have a clean corporate veil, the business has business activities and your personal stuff has personal activities, and you're not, going back and forth between the two. You're making sure that you're keeping meeting minutes with the board. Once a month, you go right down. I had a board meeting and we talked about this. This is the accounting that we had. Here's my written consent or written action for, any transfers that we did. As long as that's cataloged and kept clean, if somebody were to pursue you, even personally, they're not going to be able to get the assets that are in the LLC. Worst they can do is put a lien against it. The Rockefeller method is something we work with Laughlin to provide some of our clients. It's a little more expensive, but it does involve, having a trust or another LLC that holds a lien against your LLC, so you're still the first creditor if somebody else were to pursue you. It's a little more complicated structure. Most people just start with the LLC, like I said, especially if they have somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000 in crypto that you believe is going to go substantially higher. Most attorneys are going to tell you probably don't need it for that amount of money. And they would be right in most instances, by the way. It's my belief that these assets are going to move exponentially higher in a very short period of time. And you may not have as much time as you think to set these things up after it appreciates. The other thing that I'll say about the LLC is, here domestically in the US, you get $13 million per person that you can gift out of your taxable estate over your lifetime. That's the lifetime gift tax threshold. That's continued to go up as President Trump's been in office. I think that it will continue to go up through his term. If somebody else comes in on the other side of that, your guess is as good as mine. Biden was going to chop it down to like 3 million had he won the election. So if you think that you do want to get this stuff out of your taxable estate and into a trust and let it grow there for multiple generations, and you want it structured the right way, a benefit of having it in the LLC is you can actually gift minority interest later on after the appreciation to people that you care about. And they can come in on the cap table and you can get a 409A valuation done on the corporation. And let's say your assets in the business are worth $50 million. Even though the assets are worth $50 million, the 409A, because you have minority owners on the cap table, might only be $30 million. Well, guess what? Now you could gift that whole amount out of your taxable estate because you used some creative accounting to show that the value is less than what the assets actually are. So again, we work with clients to do all of this, but I wanted to come on here and start with it tonight because we've had a lot of questions here recently, and it's not something that I've addressed probably in the last 6 months on specifically how to do this and why to structure it a certain way. And again, what questions to ask the attorney that you might be working with on how to do this so that you don't have the tax implications and you're not setting yourself up or getting something that you don't need. So if you want to work with us on it, again, let's plug here. You can go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50OFF50OFFDAG LLC. Get you everything I just talked about: EIN, articles of organization, registered agent, certificate of good standing, banking memorandum, template for the operating agreement, and the corporate bail service for the whole year for $2,000 if you use that code 50OFF50OFFDAG LLC. So yeah, that's where I wanted to start. But the other things that are going on, I don't know. I was on a Twitter space earlier today. If you guys didn't go check that out with Armando, another XRP guy. He's a little bit bigger on Instagram. We did a Twitter spaces together today. We got an Instagram live on Friday at 5 p.m. I think Central Standard Time, 6 Eastern. I'm looking forward to that. Appreciate him taking the time out on it. He had a lot of really good analogies that I hadn't heard before. So I want to share one with you guys. He talked about market cap. And he said, look, applying market cap to crypto is kind of like applying market cap to like bags of dirt. You could go buy dirt from Home Depot and there's that much, cost per bag of dirt. How much dirt is actually out there? Are you going to try to quantify the market cap of dirt because you bought it for this amount at the store? No, it's a utility. Like that's not something that you would use for that. I wouldn't call dirt an asset, but maybe you might. Which was just a really interesting paradigm. I think a lot of people get hung up on the analogy of crypto and stocks, and so they believe that market cap is a good metric to value these assets by. I don't think it is at all. I think that these are protocols, which, how do you value the email protocol, right? Very different. Dirt can be an asset, property. Yeah, it definitely can, but different dirt costs different amounts of money, right? Depending on where that dirt is. So anyway, that was a good analogy that he shared, and he had some other good ones in there. If you guys want to go over to Twitter, I think that recording's going to be up for a week or so. And then again, we'll be back on Friday over there on Instagram. But in that, I talked about the BOJ supposedly had a meeting earlier today at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. I didn't see anything publicly stated about that. I heard some hearsay about it. We haven't seen oil continue to rise, even though the straits shut down over there. We really still need kind of a higher move here in oil to push them over the edge. We are starting to see it creep back up now that the market's back open over there. So if you want to look at the chart that I'm looking at, you can go to exchangerates.org.uk/commodities. / live oil prices / oil dash JPY. So it's oil priced in the yen. That is what I'm watching. I really don't care what it does in US dollar terms. I think that we're going to be fine. We have other means to be able to get oil, and we have seen prices increase at the pump here, and especially in Europe. Europe's in a bad situation. There's a lot of inflation happening in their economy because of the conflict that's going on there with the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. And I think that that'll just continue to compound moving forward. Even if they were to open it up, it's still going to be at least 3 to 4 weeks before the logistics and supply chain is going to return to normal. And there's definitely going to be an impact on global oil. 20% of the world's total supply of oil moves through that strait on a daily basis. And for it to be shut down, it is a big problem. This person says Australia is about to run out of fuel. Yeah, look, anything that's in that corner of the world, Japan, Australia, Southeast Asia, is going to be affected by this pretty substantially. China and Russia also very affected by this. Russia has a lot of their own oil that they can ship and kind of cover, some people's stuff. Europe is now, trying to get back in Russia's good graces because they need the natural gas and the other resources that they have and used to provide them before the sanctions were invoked. And so just to see all that taking place, pretty wild time to live in. I mean, I've been calling for this for almost 2 years. First iteration of the domino theory I put out on March 2nd of 2024. So we're just 2 days past 2 years. Tomorrow will be 3 days past 2 years since I put that out. And everything that we've been talking about for the last 6-8 months here, and really a lot of what the anticipated price move at the end of last year was based on, were these macro events transpiring. We saw some other oil related events late last year with Maduro and Venezuela. Unfortunately, that was not this event here, but we are finally here, and we are having the macro catalyst start to unfold that will lead to significant price appreciation for XRP, in my personal opinion. Other news, just before we jump into the questions, Kraken got their Fed license, or their Fed window access today. Big deal. Cynthia Loomis was on Squawk Box this morning talking about that. This is the first fintech or exchange that's ever had access to a Fed window. This opens the door for the likes of Ripple and many others to get access to that as well. I know one other company that has had a Fed window that is crypto related for an extended period of time. I won't mention who that is on here, but they were approved, and their Fed window is about 30 feet from my desk in our office. So, Kraken's not the first, but they are definitely a big deal to get this access. And I think it will open the door for the rest of the industry. And hopefully we get the Clarity Act across the line here. You've got Eric Trump coming out tonight talking about the banks, holding this up. You got Brad saying that the door is open. They just need to walk through it. Obviously, Ripple's also a bank. They have the OCC charter alongside Fidelity, Paxos, Circle, and there was one more that was issued. And then here recently we had Crypto.com get their OCC charter. So hopefully Kraken, now that they have the Fed window, maybe they'll get their OCC charter as well. But it's really cool to see the industry maturing. And again, I've talked about this before, but I'll mention it one more time before we get into the questions. Fundamentals are at an all-time high here. This is the best crypto has looked in the entire time that I have participated in it. I know the prices don't reflect that, and that's where the opportunity is. The sentiment is low right now. People are out of the market. They're getting tired. They're losing interest. People Googling crypto, very low compared to, when things are frothy. It is really good to be greedy when others are fearful, and be fearful when others are greedy. So, again, I can't give you financial advice, but I've seen a lot of people start to pick up some pretty significant positions here. And I think that they will continue to do so if the price continues to stay low. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the questions. Again, appreciate you guys taking time out of your Wednesday night to come hang out with me, ask great questions, and all the support on the channel. If you wouldn't mind, please like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, do all the stuff that you can. If you do get value from this, it does help the channel grow and does help the algorithm reach more people. We got Charity. They say, hello, XRP Mista. You might, how might U.S. warships escorting oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz influence XRP's potential price appreciation, especially if the escort helps prevent an oil spike in prices? Well, unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. The main reason that many of the ships are still not even taking them up on that is many ships have been shot down. Multiple tankers moving through the strait have been, in fact, attacked and sunk. Even with, I don't know if they've been under U.S. escort or not, but the insurers are not, they've pulled insurance. And whatever they are providing for insurance is absolutely astronomical at this point to move through that strait. So most people, they've just stopped shipping. I mean, you can literally look at the traffic there. For the first couple days, people were still trying to chance it and like sneak through, but there is a huge backlog of tankers. The traffic through the strait there is down, to like 8% of what it normally is. So there still is a little bit moving through there, but it's not anywhere close to what it needs to be. And oil has already been impacted, and I think will continue to be impacted. I think we're going to see, back over 12,000 yen tonight, and potentially even higher. If we crest that 12,500 yen up to 13,000 yen, the Bank of Japan is going to have to move with their interest rates. And that's what we're waiting on, because that's what's going to cause the reverse carry trade to unwind and all of the dominoes that I've been talking about to fall. So I know people, it was like the strait's closed. No, it's open. Now it's closed. Now it's open again. It doesn't matter at this point. The damage is done, and the wheels are already in motion. The train has left the station. So if things continue to pay out at the rate that they are, we could see the reverse carry trade unwind this week, which would be wild. Now, could they push it to next week? Sure. But I don't know that they could push it much further along than that. I don't know what they're waiting on, but I do think they're waiting on something to let this thing run. Bank of Japan also said that they could implement XRP and the XRP ledger for their payments and their infrastructure in the very near future. It would be interesting if the Bank of Japan came out and said, we're raising interest rates and we're rolling out XRP across our banking infrastructure. You would see huge amounts of FOMO move into XRP. I'll say this also, a little birdie mentioned to me that there might be some exciting news coming out from Ripple in the coming days. I have no idea what the news is. I just heard that there might be something really cool that's put out. So we'll see if that's the case or not. You never know with these deals. There's lots of hearsay out there, but came from a fairly credible source. So we'll see what actually comes out. Be great to see the Bank of Japan using XRP. You got Grand Rising. They say, Carbon One member, awesome dude, glad to have you in the community. Any suggestions on managing millions in a fund bag post price appreciation? Personal money outside of an LLC. Is brokerage account best? Thanks for your wisdom. Yeah, look, a lot of people are going to become a family office. Traditionally, in order to become a family office, you needed $100 million or more. Okay, we believe that that's closer to like 20 or 50 million. And I know that sounds crazy, right? But there are a lot of people that have 20,000 XRP, 50,000 XRP, 100,000 XRP, and when it goes to $1,000 plus, they will have those type of numbers. And just not that long ago, they were probably working W-2. They probably just stacked their bag during the lawsuit, have been dedicated, scrimped by on some things to stack some extra. And that's going to pay dividends for multiple generations. But when they set up the family office, you're going to be managing your own money. Like, you're in the business of managing your own money. That is what a family office is. And you probably want to hire some professionals. Many family offices have, their own professionals in-house. They'll also outsource some management. If you have proficiency managing a portfolio and you understand stocks and, a couple $1,000,000 is your fun bag to, play the pink sheets or do whatever you're going to do over there on the stock market, sure. Yeah, brokerage accounts fine. I mean, there's lots of them. There's Webull, there's E-Trade, there's eToro, there's Robinhood. I know there's honestly a lot of people. People in my peer group have a couple $1,000,000 portfolio on those platforms. And they'll day trade and they kind of, take some shots and take some bets. Some of them do it on Polymarket, which is another thing we talked about with Armando earlier. So yeah, look, you want something that's stable, that's going to provide you income to allow you to live your lifestyle and continue to compound your investments over time. So if you had $100 million and, that's in structured products and your portfolios, low risk. If you're an XRP, I think it'll be a tier 1 asset. So you're going to be very low risk on that. And then you'll be able to put that to work to earn some yield, cover your living expenses plus some extra every month. Be a little bit more aggressive with a portion of your portfolio if you decide to do that. And then if you had, 3 to 5% of that you took and put it in other stuff that was a bit riskier, like you're talking about, playing stocks or trading, day trading, pink sheets or other things. Yeah, I think that's a reasonable risk tolerance. My concern would be, you only made a couple $1,000,000 and now you're going to go roll it on some stocks. Not that, a couple $1,000,000 is a little bit amount of money or a lot of money. It would be difficult for somebody to retire on a couple $1,000,000. So you probably would need to do a little bit better than that to, effectively retire and live a very comfortable lifestyle. In my opinion, $10 million at 5% a year probably does it, right? And you could probably be a little more aggressive. Let's say you're making 6 to 8, and you got maybe 6 or 8 million, right? 3 to 500,000, $600,000 a year. Most parts of the U.S., you're going to be doing okay. You're going to be able to pay your rent, groceries, other things, insurance, whatever it is, and you'll be good to go. But a couple $1,000,000, I wouldn't roll everything into a fund bag. I would keep a portion, whatever that is to you, in something structured that covers your normal bills. I will get to them. Okay. My wife has reminded me that I need to get to the super chats that I missed on Monday, so we will do that real quick before we get into this more. Truth of Hearts, appreciate you. She's always on here asking good questions. She says Ripple partnered with Bank of America in 2019, started settling international transactions on the XRPL since 2025, and Ripple partnered with Uphold. Chase is opening their own trust bank and partnering with Coinbase. Thoughts? Any other beans you got? I saw an email that was out there on the open internet today about Bank of America changing their payment rails and making transfers and payments faster as of March 28th this year. That is 24 days away. They have over 84 different blockchain patents leveraging the XRPL. They've been a Ripple partner, like she states here, I think actually sooner than 2019. I think they were actually listed on Ripple's website in 2018. But, for them to be partnered that long, and you know what? I'll say this. I don't know if you guys watched the interview with Paul Barron or not. He kind of alluded to a big announcement from Ripple also. There's somebody else different that mentioned it to me, separate of Paul. But he said it might be in correlation with a large bank. He did not state which bank, would be involved there. But since you bring up Bank of America and their partnership, sure would be interesting if Bank of America came out and said, hey, we're moving to this on March 28th this year, and we're using Ripple services and Ripple payments and XRP Ledger and XRP. I think that would get the price moving if they were to do that. But for JP Morgan, JP Morgan was actually, they came to Ripple's office in 2017 and they wanted to buy the entire escrow. They wanted to control the monetary system, and Ripple basically told them, up yours. That's not happening. And then they created the escrow in 2018. Actually, it was in 2017 when they created the escrow. And I think that was provoked by JP Morgan coming and asking for that XRP. If it's in escrow, they can't take it, right? So that's, I think, how they looked at it. Now it's in a programmatic release, $1 billion a month. Speaking of which, let's take a look here. I haven't seen if Ripple has put the escrow release from this month out on the market, but I'll tell you guys how to find out where that's at. So if you want to go over to Whale Alert, they do a good job of putting out all the large transactions across all the different blockchains. When the escrow was released, it was late on February 28th, which was past Union specific time, which is when their lockup ends. You can go to the transaction that had 300,000 XRP released. You can go to the receiver account, and yeah, here we are. There's still 500 million XRP sitting in this wallet that Ripple owns. So they have not put that XRP onto the market. We had a big inflow on the ETFs today, over 50 million. Bitwise, always crushing it. They have the largest amount of inflows and volume on their ETF out of all of them. Then you got 21 shares, you got Canary Capital and many others, Rex Osprey and some of the other that are all cataloged. I don't know what the website is, but there's a website where you can actually go. Chad Steingraber, if you guys don't follow him over there on Twitter, highly recommend doing that. He puts out updates daily on where everything's at. But with all this XRP still sitting here in Ripple's wallet, and if they're not going to sell that onto the market, I think we are down to the bottom of the barrel on the supply over there on the exchanges, OTC desk, and dark pools for XRP. So it would be a really opportune time for BlackRock to roll their ETF here if they wanted to push the price a lot higher. Just saying. So anyway, back to squirrel. I'm sorry, but back to Chase. They built their own infrastructure called Onyx. They kind of bet on Ethereum, and then they had to come back to the table. And that's why I think the XRPL integrated the EVM sidechain so that it was interoperable with Axelar and Chase's ecosystem over there on Onyx for their tokenized environment. We needed some type of EVM compatibility between those to be able to make that work. But for them to choose Coinbase, Coinbase has Base and a lot of other things that they've rolled out. They have fantastic product market fit. And it's not a surprise to me that they would choose them. I do think that everything will settle back to the XRPL, irrespective of which ecosystem you're using. There's always going to have to be one centralized ledger that everything settles back to at the end of the day. And then the other super chat that I missed, this person says, under Basel III liquidity coverage and capital reserve requirements, would banks realistically warehouse XRP exposure or strictly treat it as a transit settlement liquidity? And how does that affect the supply and demand aspect? Carbon One member, love the mastermind. God bless. Thank you, legend. Thank you, Brett. I appreciate the question here and appreciate you being part of the community. Yeah, it's going to depend on the volatility of the asset. So David Schwartz was asked this question not that long ago at XRP Community Day, and he said, people think clarity is what's holding the banks and institutions back from actually adopting and holding these digital assets. And he said that that's not actually the case. It's the volatility of the asset. So I would answer this in two ways. I think XRP is going to be a high, stable value. And then they would warehouse it. They would hold it on their balance sheet. They would use it as a capital asset. They would do all those things. If there continues to be significant volatility in the asset, even post-price appreciation, I think that it'll be more of a transactional deal where they rent it for a period of time or they just access it when they need it and they wouldn't hold it. Based on everything that I can discern, Ripple and anybody else involved with XRP that wants to see a significantly higher price, you want the banks to hold it. You want XRP locked up. You want it being put to work. You want it off of the open market. And so in my mind, I think that it will be warehoused by the banks. I think that they will take their options that they were sold by Ripple early on and exercise those, I think that they'll, end up with a bunch of XRP that'll offset the losses that they have from the reverse carry trade and everything else that's been going on, and all the debt that we've issued. And they will hold that on their balance sheet. They'll put it in liquidity pools. They'll do other things with it for structured products against XRP to generate returns. And they will keep it off the open market. And then occasionally, if they need to, they will use it to settle their transactions with other counterparties. But I think they're going to want to retain the lion's share of the XRP that they are, leveraging. And so, how would that affect liquidity? If there's still a ton of supply, price isn't going to be that high, but the more that gets locked up with the amount of demand that we know is on the horizon here, it is going to have to be a much, much higher price. And both these people are in the mastermind. Again, appreciate you guys taking the time out to ask questions here and for the super chat. If you want to join the mastermind, you want to be a part of a group of over 18,000 people that understand digital assets, have aligned interest in wanting to better themselves and better their lives and their families, and understand, how to best position themselves for what's coming. You can just go check that out. It is at beyondbroke.com. You can use the code beyondbroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO, like Mary Oscar. Till Valhalla says no price predictions. I don't have any price predictions, but other people will say that I do. Whale Fud, which is another account over there on Twitter, looked like they took it from another publication, but I did say on Paul's podcast, I said, look, I can't give any specifics, but with the catalysts that exist out there in the open market right now, I do think if things continue at the pace that they are currently, we could absolutely see, $1,000 XRP this year. And I know how crazy that sounds. I get that. The only thing I would say to challenge it for people that might be hesitant to believe that is that didn't come from me. Okay. Ripple did not explicitly say that, but Monica Long, when asked what she thought about where the XRPL and XRP was in 2026, she said we would see full scale institutional adoption this year. For that to happen, the amount of liquidity that's going to be required in the asset to start being able to facilitate those payment flows for the value or the amount of supply that I believe is on the open market, $100 to $1,000, very easily justifiable to make that a viable possibility. And I don't think that they would come out, Ripple. I mean, she's president there at Ripple. She's not going to come out and put that on the line unless she's just very certain that that's going to happen. So Joshua Morris says Shane Ellis theory. If you haven't ever looked that up, I would highly encourage you to go check it out. He talks about the exchanges going illiquid, explicitly Bitfinex, which is very Tether dominant. And if they were to have a situation with Tether where they became illiquid, they could adopt XRP and drive the price to $589 is what he put there. It's actually $500 in that, original thesis or the theory that he put out. There's Shane Ellis theory, and Shane Ellis plays a role in my domino theory. I do think that Tether will be impacted by the reverse carry trade unwinding, and we will see that scenario actually come out. We got T. Curtis. He says, so Jed is the Teflon Don of our time. Nothing for him in Mt. Gox, the SEC, Taco, Stellar, etc. DWP custodies XLM and nobody offers products for it. What's the real story and why shouldn't I own a lot? It's a good question. I'm torn on XLM. I won't talk about my religious viewpoint on here about XLM. I don't own any. It's not to say that I don't think it'll be very successful. We've talked with a lot of people that have implemented Hyperledger for peer-to-peer transactions and merchant services. I think that it's absolutely going to be a giant in that industry. Jed, to your point, has somehow evaded all of the bad things that have happened right after he's left, or not too long after he's left somewhere. So, he was at Mt. Gox. They were hacked in 2014. He left in 2013 or 2012 to go to Ripple, an open coin, about 2 years before that happened. And then he was with them up until about 2016, 2017, and that's when he broke out and launched an exact replica of the XRPL with XLM. The difference there is, the origin account hasn't been black holed like with the XRPL. So, they could potentially mint more of it. I have things out there that say both ways. I don't know which one's true. It's hard to get a definitive answer on that. They did burn half the supply though. So what was originally 100 billion Stellar is now 50 billion Stellar. And he sold off all of his XRP, and he's really not overly involved with Stellar anymore. He's kind of moved on from there to a company called Vast. For those that don't know, they are commercializing space travel with building space stations for commercial use and other applications like, well, I can't talk about that. So sorry. Really cool stuff that they're going to be doing up there in space. Completely new economies. And he sold all of his XRP to invest in that company. So if you can imagine selling your XRP to invest in this company, how profitable he thinks this company is going to have to be in order to be able to justify, that risk-adjusted return. So we actually, through the mastermind, we had a deal that we put together and invested in that company in the only round they've done. Again, I have certain feelings about Jed, and some of the things that have followed behind him. But that doesn't mean that the things that he's participated in have been bad. They have all been very profitable. So, again, I don't own any XLM personally. We absolutely custody it over there at DWP. We're working on products and solutions to be able to generate returns on it. The majority of our client base holds an allocation of that. It's just not something I personally have an allocation to. And I do think that that'll do exceptionally well along with HBAR and a few others alongside XRP. Crane, man, he says legend. What's up, dude? Tinfoil hat question. After the feds get taken down and the monetary system changes, what happens to existing debt? It's restructured. So you can't just wipe it. I know a lot of people just want a debt jubilee, like they're just going to, forego your debt on your credit card. In certain cultures, debt's forgiven every 7 years. That's why bankruptcies last 7 years on your credit report. So, I don't know what that looks like at a sovereign level or at a government level. But they're going to have to restructure it. And the reason for that is one person's debt is another person's asset. So you look at pension funds, you look at anything where you've put out money or you owe money to somebody else. The banks themselves, they'll create these mortgages, they collateralize those, they roll them up, and they sell these mortgage-backed securities that other people buy and invest in to be able to get the continual payments off of that. They're not just going to wipe your mortgage. Okay, and they can't just wipe the U.S. debt. What they can do is revalue it, or they can, and a lot of countries have done this by hyperinflating their currency. And we've been able to do this like and slow roll it over time. Is you're basically repaying the debt with cheaper currency in the future, right? And that's why, as growing up, my parents were like, debt is a bad thing. It's horrible. Debt's one of the best tools that you can use to actually get ahead in the current system. I don't know what that's going to look like in an asset-backed system. I think it's going to be very different. I think savers are going to be winners. Today, though, savers are losers. The more money that you can borrow responsibly and buy assets with, and then those assets generate cash that's worth less later on, but your note's still the same, you actually make more money doing it that way. And a lot of people have gotten very wealthy since the 80s as the interest rates have continued to come down, and they've been able to refinance assets the whole time using debt and leveraging that to be able to generate billions of dollars in some of these portfolios over that 50-year span. So anyway, not advocating for people taking on unnecessary debt, but it is a tool. And if you understand how to use it correctly, it can be an advantage. But back to the sovereign debt that we have. If you think of it as a balance sheet, we've got $38 trillion in outstanding debt. We either have to generate that money through some other means aside from taxes, because we can't tax people more, like they will start leaving the US. Because the tax rates here aren't horrible, but they're much worse than Dubai or Singapore or some of these other jurisdictions that many people have already moved to. And so they're going to have to start generating value another way. A way to do that would be able to aggregate an asset on your balance sheet that was going to appreciate substantially, and then be able to put that to work somehow to be able to generate excess returns. Namely, I think XRP could serve in that capacity. So David Sachs has said that they haven't done a full financial audit of the United States government to see what cryptos they hold. They talked about, the Bitcoin reserve and potentially another reserve with XRP Cardano, Solana, and some others. And we really haven't heard much about it since then. But I do think that they, in the past, when they've had to revalue things and restructure debt, they just change the value of gold. There's not enough gold at this point, and gold and oil, really, they don't have the liquidity necessary. You need some mechanism to be able to transfer those. I do think that they will peg old gold and oil at a certain value. So it'll be so many ounces per barrel of oil, and that's what it'll be, uniformly across the world. And then people will, back their currencies with both of those commodities and use XRP to transfer that value between each other so that there's trust to be able to transact. Or they might even, designate XRP a tier 1 asset, and that could also be used to back currencies with. So imagine you had all these liabilities. It's way up here. It's all this. It's costs you this much, and your assets are down here. If you had an asset on your balance sheet that appreciated, 1,000x, now you're even, or maybe you're even up on your assets over your liabilities. And that's how I think they'll be able to offset the debt. In the past, like I said, they've had to reprice gold. With this, they just have to drive the demand to where they need it to in order to reprice it through supply and demand dynamics on the open market. And I think that's why they've chosen what they've chosen. And again, take all this with a grain of salt. I'm just some dude on the internet. I've been really blessed to be in some cool rooms and have conversations with cool people. But, you should probably get multiple opinions before making your own thesis. We actually already went over this one. Scrolling on down. We're about an hour in here. So I'm going to go ahead and go all the way to the bottom on the super chats and over here on YouTube. And I'm going to work my way back up. If you're watching, just go ahead and cut off the super chats. If you do put one on there, you can message us, after, and we'll get to it next week. I hate when I miss these. So just letting you know, I'm starting at the bottom. Vic, you're Victor, you nailed it. I'm going to start with you and then work my way up the chat. So anybody else that puts one here, it'll probably get kicked to next week. Victor says, how much is the LLC to keep active yearly with your firm? And with Trump having U.S. insurance on oil ships going through the Strait, does that hinder oil spiking? It's done something to kind of curb it here, but I don't think that that's going to last very long. The supply chain's been impacted, and even if they do provide insurance, it doesn't need to be a long delay. And I've said this the whole time. It could be shut down for a couple days. That's all I wanted. And that's what we got. I don't even care if the conflict continues to persist over there. I wish it wouldn't. I think it'd be great if they would just stop it here. All the damage has been done to cause the spike in oil, and have all of this play out just as I've laid out for 2 years with what's currently been done. So the LLC, it depends on what all you have. If you want to do the corporate veil service with us alongside all of the other stuff, it's $1,500. I think if you just wanted to do the annual maintenance, it's like $500. And that includes the state fee, the state filing, all of the annual filings that we have to maintain the EIN and the registered agent there in the state. And we make a little bit of money to do that, right? Like we're providing a service. If you did it directly yourself, you're probably about half that much. and the main value prop that we have is the corporate veil service, because a lot of people are, I don't want to say are lazy, but I am. Like, I forget to do stuff unless somebody reminds me, and they're kind of on my ass about it a little bit, and then I will make sure and get it done and do my meeting minutes and all the stuff that I'm supposed to do. And they help you do all that. So it's well worth it. I think it's more like an insurance policy. If you're thinking about, the creditor protection that's going to help you maintain, I think it's well worth it. Especially, one lawsuit's going to cost you way more than it would otherwise. In the $1,500 is well justified to make sure that you're not having to deal with that. So yeah, I don't think that Trump, saying that the U.S. will insure vessels is going to have any effect on the outcome that I know is inevitable here in the near future. And I'm hoping people give me a little bit of grace, by the way. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I think if I'm within 90 days, I was pretty gung-ho at the end of last year that things were going to work out. But if it happens within 90 days, I mean, nobody's perfect on timing, right? And we seem to be right on the precipice of it here. Like, this is everything that I've been believing was going to happen. And I thought it could happen, pretty quickly at the end of last year, but it obviously didn't take place. And so here we are, 63 days later. We'll see. Chris, he says, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom so consistently with the XRP family. It's helped keep the faith. My question is around using Nexo to earn interest on XRP bag until we reach a minimum for DWP. I've used Nexo in the past. I did some leveraged loans with Nexo, and I did stake my XRP on Nexo for a very short period of time when they were available in the US the first time before they got removed. I don't think they're going to go anywhere, but they could. They're an offshore entity, right? Anytime you're moving your XRP onto something that's offshore and you don't know what all is involved, you're taking a risk. For me, it's not worth it, and that's why we created what we did with DWP. But you mentioned, like, you don't quite have enough to hold it over there yet. I'm just going to say it. We're going to run some specials in the near future that I think you guys are going to be excited about. And it's going to open the door to a lot of people that might not have 50,000 XRP currently. So, hang out for that for a second. I'm not telling you don't use Nexo, okay? We have some people that are clients that have some at Doppler. They're using a VPN, which I've told them, that doesn't help Doppler out. I want Doppler to be successful, and they've geo-fenced the U.S. And if you have U.S. residents, basically violating securities laws and participating with them, it doesn't do them any favors. They do have a good product and a good team. They just launched a partnership with Hex Trust today. Awesome to see that. You got Soil coming out that's going to pay somewhere between 8 and 5% on your XRP using private credit. You got Flare, coming out with a 6 to 15% yield in the near future. There's all counterparty risk with all these things, and there's smart contract risk. There's no insurance. You just, like, maybe a small piece of your bag, right? It depends on your risk tolerance, really. Like, the value proposition for XRP at scale 12 months from now, I think you're going to have all kinds of opportunities. We're going to continue to cultivate those relationships and bring them to market over the next 12 months. We have a ton of stuff lined up to be able to generate return on XRP over the next 12 months inside of institutional custody. And our minimums, we want to democratize access as much as we can. We're working on a platform right now to be able to do that. I'm hoping weeks, not months, on that. But everything always takes longer than I want it to, so I don't have an exact timing for it. But we see all these things. We want to make sure that we're helping as many people as possible. We believe, like I said earlier, I think XRP could easily go to $1,000 in a short period of time, and those that have 10,000 or 20,000 XRP are $10 or $20 million in the black. You're doing great. if you don't have a sustainable way to, move that into institutional custody and start generating returns pretty quickly, not great, right? And if there's stuff that's out there is just sketchy stuff, and you're not sure about all it, maybe you deploy a little bit into those things, put your toe in the water, test it out. And again, not talking bad about Nexo or any of these other people. We're a centralized counterparty also, right? The difference that I think we have is we're regulated. We're an SEC regulated RIA. We actually just went through, we're still going through the SEC audit for the first time. It's just a regular annual audit, but we've got them with oversight on everything that we're doing. We've done everything the right way to the highest standard that we can. We're, pioneering what wealth management looks like for digital assets in this space, and we've got a lot of products and solutions and know-how to be able to help people along the way. So again, it sounds like you want to work with us. We would love to work with you. We're working on ways to be able to do that in the near future. It's up to you on your risk tolerance if you want to participate at Nexo or not. They just recently came back here to the US. They've emailed me multiple times. I personally have not, but I have DWP, right? So I don't know how I would feel if I didn't have access to the other. Honest Aim, he says, Mr. Legacy, hi to the Tea Lady. Thanks for all that you do. DWP Mastermind, Beyond Broke Mastermind, DWP, DAG, Corporate Structure, Anchorage, Arch, Lending, Hedge Fund Access, IRA products. Wow. As for us, we're white glove customers all the way. It was great to see you guys at the VanEck dinner last night. Appreciate y'all coming out. We did that in Dallas. We co-hosted that with VanEck. Had about, I don't know, maybe 40 people in the room. A wide variety of individuals, most of them domestic here to Texas, came in from the broader area, and a couple people from out of state I saw there. Appreciate them coming down. And we talked about, where the regulations sit, where the industry is going, AI, how that's going to be implemented with blockchain, the changes in the industry. Had a really good cohort of questions that people put together and asked myself and Wyatt, who runs their VC arm over there at VanEck. So shout out to Laura and the team over there for taking the time and partnering with us on that. If you haven't checked out VanEck's funds, they do some really cool stuff, and want to just continue to cultivate a relationship with them. They're working on their money market that uses ROUSD, so we want to continue to support that. It's something that we're looking at, and yeah, we'll continue that relationship and hopefully be hosting more dinners in the near future with VanEck. But again, appreciate you coming out. Honest Aim, it was good to see you and your wife, and again, appreciate all the support and using all the products and services. I mean, that you just mentioned. Like, it's they've been here from the beginning. We started the mastermind. We might have had, I don't know, they were probably in the first 40 people, 50 people that were in the mastermind. So they've seen this thing grow all for the last 3 years. We started the mastermind in January of 2023, and we've grown to 18,000 members there in that group over the last 3 years. We went 0 to $1 billion in AUM at Digital Wealth Partners. And yeah, I think we're just the tip of the iceberg. I think things are going to continue to escalate from here. And we have no end in sight. We're going to continue to innovate and bring products and solutions to market that I want specifically. And as I solve my own problems, I think I'll be able to solve those for the broader XRP family as well. And other cryptos also. Like, we custody Bitcoin, ETH, Solana, Matic, Chainlink, Avalanche, Quant, XLM, HBAR. We do HBAR now, and we should, don't hold me to this, but I'm hoping that we'll have XDC in the not too distant future. We got S. Abramson says, hey Jake, like your high energy and entrepreneurial spirit. Appreciate that, man. Thank you. He says, what is the chance that Tether bankrupts Kraken and Coinbase, added the NASDAQ? Will this save them? Added the something. There was a GIF there, but I don't know what it is. Question, Two, any other cryptos that will experience scarcity? If so, how far out? Good questions. I think Bitfinex will have some problems because they're so reliant on Tether. Coinbase and Kraken, I think, will go illiquid, but I think they will immediately pivot to XRP alongside Bitfinex, and that'll continue to drive demand. I don't think they're going to go out of business or have, a huge impact. There will definitely be short-term impact on their businesses, but I think they're going to be okay. The other thing I'll say about Kraken is now that they have the Fed Master account, they'll be able to access liquidity through that and be bailed out. And it wouldn't surprise me to see Coinbase and Ripple also get Fed Master accounts now that they've, given that to Kraken. NASDAQ, I don't think is going to be the one that saves them. I do think it'll be XRP. Coinbase is trading stocks 24/5, which is wild. And NASDAQ's promoting that. They actually had it up there on their billboard today in New York. So, I think that there's a corollary there. Maybe NASDAQ acquires Coinbase somehow. That'd be wild if that happened. But, NASDAQ has stated that they are going to tokenize stocks in the second half of 2026, along with the New York Stock Exchange. And also Paul Adkins, the SEC chair, has advocated for that as well, along with Larry Fink. And again, when I say $1,000 XRP, that's what is going to be required to settle it real time on the back end between the DTCC or with the DTCC between the clearinghouses and the brokers. And they're going to need that. That's the first place they're implementing distributed ledger technology. So, tokenization of stocks could happen on Canton or another network, but the settlement, I think, will absolutely be through XRP. But to your question on what are some of the other cryptos I think will have some scarcity and price appreciation, I think Hyperliquid. We've already seen a pretty significant rise in Hyperliquid with the perps trading that's on chain. That's a big deal. Their integration with Hidden Road was pretty cool to see. I don't know if that one will continue to see, but that's the whole value prop for that token is as they generate returns through their business, they buy back the token and they burn it. So if you're talking about scarcity, that's probably one of them. When you're looking at, price appreciation and adoption, XLM and HBAR, I think, are probably both up there. XDC as well. All of those, I think, will be adopted and used, and they'll have some pretty significant volume move over the network, which will cause demand and scarcity of those assets. Not all of the XDC has been put out on the market. Same thing with HBAR. Same thing with XLM. There is, some held away. So all of those could have some scarcity and significant demand that drove the price higher. One of the sleepers that's out there is Hash. I've talked about that one before. That's Provenance's blockchain token. Figure Markets is where you can buy that at. Again, not advocating that you go buy any of these. I'm just talking through stuff that I think is cool and probably will have adoption and use case in the future, some utility. Another one that I don't think people are watching that I've become aware of because we have a few clients that have brought this to our attention. Athleta. So Athleta is now the 339th largest market cap token, slowly creeping up. A lot of the upside has already been had there, but we had a family that reached out to us about 6 months ago that was in West Texas, and they got in at the ICO, which really wasn't an ICO. They bought a bunch of nodes and it came with token warrants, but the tokens were worth like 20 cents when they got in, and it's now trading at over $200 per token. So there's things like that out there. The only thing that concerns me about that one is the only pair it has is on MEXC with Tether. So I'm hoping that they can kind of de-risk that a little bit and maybe get some pairs with some other stable coins and maybe get a listing on some other exchanges. But to see, really happy for that family and also their loved ones that they got in on that opportunity. There is cool stuff like that that's out there. We'll see how that one works out. You know, there's still a long road on that one. They've got a lockup period on the tokens. They've got a lot of traction with soccer clubs and other things that they're doing. But, you know, if it being tied to Tether and it's its only pair does concern me. Trish, she says, when Ripple acts as a functional bank, where can you walk in to do business? I'm sure that bank will give yield to XRP. They will never have anything that is retail focused. They're always going to be B2B enterprise. They're never going to have a physical location where any one individual can go park their XRP there. They have zero intent of working with individuals. That became apparent to me, and it was kind of disheartening, right? Because I thought the same thing. Like, I thought all of these banks and institutions are going to want to, they're going to love retail. They're going to love to work with high net worth individuals that hold significant amounts of XRP. They don't care. They're worried about, you know, enterprise use case, high ticket, large value payments, and scale treasury management for companies, real world application of this technology on chain for lending and all the other stuff they're going to be able to do. They're a back end platform for banks. They're not, I mean, they are a bank themselves, but they're never going to be public facing. Now, there may be other counterparties that work with them that distribute access to retail, but Ripple themselves, I don't think, well, I know. So, and I'll circle back on this. So the reason I know that's not the case, that they're not going to do that, is we had our accounts at Standard Custody when Standard Custody was acquired by Ripple. Before we migrated to Anchorage in 2024, we had about, it wasn't a ton of, maybe about 30 million XRP over there under custody with Standard Custody. And when Ripple made that acquisition, they said, shoo shoo. We were their only wealth management client at the time. And I said, well, but it's XRP. Like, wouldn't you guys love to, like, our clients would love to park it with you guys and earn a return. And they said, we have 4.8 billion XRP. Why do we need yours? Okay. That was my response. I was like, all right, well, I'll go figure it out then. And we have, you know, over the past 2 years, we had the first ever securities product to be able to generate returns on XRP without DeFi in a regulated capacity here in the US. We have over $400 million worth of XRP in that hedge fund. If we were on chain, we would be the largest liquidity pool or DeFi protocol on the XRPL. But we do it all off chain. We do it through a regulated entity, a hedge fund, and that's how we manage it with all the disclosures buttoned up, done the right way here in the US. So anyway, all that said, I know people would love that to be the case where Ripple catered to the average person that had a large amount of XRP. That's never going to be the case, unfortunately. The House Junkie says, can you talk about Elon Musk choosing Cross River for X money? Is that good for XRP? It sure is. So Cross River has been a Ripple partner for an extended period of time. Like I said before, everything's going to settle back to the XRPL. There was a lady that I know well, is friends with Elon, and she, knew him when he was in California before he moved to Texas. So this had to have been 6-7 years ago. And they were out to dinner one night, and she asked him, what crypto should I look at? And he said Doge and XRP. Those were the two he told her to buy and look at. And she was like, I wish I had listened. Well, we've talked about it in the past. But I mean, if that tells you anything, I think that, X payments will likely have Doge usage in some capacity. I think it'll be a social token on the network, or on the platform on X. And I don't know about XRP, but I think XRP will facilitate back-end settlement. But like the merchant service and payment processor, again, Hyperledger, I think is who's going to end up winning out there. And Cross River could probably do both. So very interesting to see that partnership. And I do think it's bullish for XRP with X payments. couple more super chats here. We got Marty. What's going on? Gilliam, he says, big brother from another mother. Thanks so much for educating us all. God bless you, the tea lady, and your wonderful family. Thank you, man. Thank you for the kind words, the support, being here, asking good questions, and God bless you and your family. I'm excited for the future, the near future. We're trading back over 12,000 on oil priced in yen here. We've started to see the market move up. Markets are open over there in Japan, and I'm sure people are bidding this up, understanding what's about to happen for energy costs. So again, big brother from another mother. Appreciate you, Marty. Hope you have a wonderful night, a wonderful week, and thanks again for the super chat. We got Roofnit. They say, hi, do you feel like this new system is going to usher in the mark of the beast eventually? Oh man, we're going to go down that road. Look, people thought the social security number was the mark of the beast. I mean, you could take this a lot of different directions. I mean, is the singularity the Antichrist? Could they, create themselves the Antichrist? Sure. One world money, I do think, is completely possible with the application of this technology at scale. I don't think that's XRP though. I think XRP is going to afford people. I think the meek will inherit the earth with XRP, and I think they'll be able to prevent a lot of things and manipulation and problems that could have transpired otherwise. If you take that responsibility seriously, I do. That's why I do what I do. I want to sit at the table to make sure that we're doing the right things. But all that being said, there, like I said a little bit earlier, and I won't go into detail on this, but there's a reason I don't own XLM, because of what you just said right there. And again, that is an emotional, principle-based decision on my side. Probably not a profitable one, right? But I'll say this, and everybody that's here that has a substantial amount of XRP, whatever that means to you, you're going to have real capital to put to work, and you're going to have social capital and resources, and the principles and the way you make decisions on how that capital is allocated, you get that privilege on the other side of this. You can decide, what you invest in, the communities that you help, the causes that you help, the value that you create in society, and how that capital is deployed. And it's not always about making the most amount of money. Money is probably the cheapest form of value transfer. And sometimes it's relationship capital. I've made investments in other companies and funds because I wanted to have a closer relationship with the people. I don't really care how the money performs. Same thing, for other causes. We had a deal that we put together in the mastermind that did resonant frequency off of Wi-Fi. The company's called Curve Point, if you want to go check it out. The first application for that technology is finding guns in schools, right? So investing in progressive tech that's actually changing society for the better, that's impact investing, right? You're going to have those choices, and you're going to be able to make those on the other side of price appreciation. So just be a good steward. If you haven't yet, I would highly recommend, setting up a mission statement for your family, thinking through core values and principles, skills, traits, and beliefs that you want to cultivate in your children and the next generation and your grandkids, and putting together, a family compass or a family charter that you sit down and talk to your family about on, a fairly regular basis. You see, businesses that have mission statements and core values up on the wall. If you really live by those things, people learn from example, right? But I will say, having a family meeting quarterly or biannually and starting off with those things and talking through why you make decisions the way you make them and what principles you use to do that, that's going to do wonders for your ability your family's ability to continue to be a good steward of the money and preserve that capital over the long term. So I said this with Armando earlier, but you should only have to get rich once. If you have to get rich twice, it means you messed up. Snowcar says, Jake, if XRP jumps to even $12, that would be exciting, but expected. However, normie ETF owners would be blown away. Can you think of any ETF ever that's appreciated that much in a short time frame? Ooh, I'm sure that there's been a basket ETF of tech stocks or AI stocks early on that moved that fast. But most of the time, those gains are going to be in alternative investments like you're talking about. It's few and far between that you see a stock or an ETF have that level of performance. But I do think people are going to be pleasantly surprised for those that have invested in the XRP ETFs. Truth of Hearts again says, KT Babies here. What's going on? She says, if onboarding, does your crypto need to be in a cold wallet under the LLC in order to bring it over? Can it be done from a personal wallet? We can take on personal accounts. So, you can also use that personal wallet to fund the LLC there at Anchorage, and that can count as your capital contribution for making that transfer. So, it's up to you. We always recommend that people structure an LLC to be able to manage their assets. If you've got enough to be, meeting the minimums over their DWP, you definitely have enough to start setting up an LLC and structuring it the right way. But we will take on individuals, so if you do have enough, you've got over 50,000 XRP, and you don't necessarily want to set up the LLC yet, or you're okay with paying the taxes, or, you don't want to worry about it, but you want the assurance of institutional custody, then yeah, we would still love to work with you, but you can absolutely use that personal wallet to make the contribution to the LLC inside of Anchorage to set that up. This person's asked, is an LLC or a C-Corp better? So I'll talk about that. There was a person that asked me about an S-Corp and, transferring that to Wyoming and doing some stuff earlier today. So, the reason that we do an LLC versus a C-Corp, C-Corp has stock. LLC has equity units. If you are in a lawsuit and somebody takes control of the stock in your C-Corp and it holds assets, they can then liquidate those assets, pay themselves back, and give you back the worthless stock. Okay. A C-Corp's great if you're going to make a lot of money and use it as a management corporation that doesn't have ownership of the underlying companies. Because you're not doing this to create enterprise value and scale it and sell it. Okay. You're doing this to prevent creditors from taking your assets and structuring things the right way to make sure that you're mitigating as much tax as possible. So C-Corp can definitely be used. We have seen people structure it that way, but never to hold the assets. It's always inside of an irrevocable trust or an LLC where the assets are held, and the C-Corp is a manager and has a contract between those two and is paid a fee for management of the assets, but does not own the LLC itself. The LLC, again, has equity units, whereas an S-Corp and a C-Corp both have stock. The reason we don't use an S-Corp, because other people are like, well, S-Corps are great, there's pass-through taxation, and you're right. But one, like I just mentioned, the stock is an issue. If somebody sues the S-Corp and takes over the stock, they can sell your assets and give you back the useful stock. Also, S-Corps can't have trusts or other LLCs or other entities on the cap table. They have to be individuals on the cap table of an S-Corp. So, for those reasons, we tend to see people use an LLC to manage their digital assets as a holding company versus, a C-Corp or an S-Corp doing the same thing. I know this is a lot of business law. There's 3 classes in college that actually translate to real life, and what I do today, business law was one of those. And I didn't learn any of this stuff in business law. This is all stuff that I've had to learn from the professionals that we work with over a period of time, because I asked all these same questions. I'm like, well, why don't we use this? Or why don't we use that? This sounds like a better thing. And then they explained to me, Jake, you don't know what you're talking about. These are the reasons. These are the top 5 reasons why we're not going to do that. I'm like, oh, okay. So you know, you guys get the edited version of all the mistakes that I've made. I try to communicate and tell you guys why, very simply and easily, you know, why these are the best choices to make in certain circumstances versus others. And again, can't give you advice. So, you know, I gave my disclaimer earlier, but none of this is financial advice, legal or tax advice. You should always talk to your CPA, lawyer, or financial advisor before making any tax, legal, or financial decisions. I'm just here to give you guys my experience and what I've been told by my advisors, and you can do with that as you will. Can your child support dollars increase after Moon? Yeah, she could take you back to court. And if you have a higher income, she could absolutely come after you for more money. And like, don't be a deadbeat dad. Pay for your kids. You know what I mean? Like, just because the relationship didn't work out with her, and I know there's a lot of hard feelings about that. Texas has daddy's rights, you know, men's rights a lot of the time. Not saying, you know, it's right one way or the other, but don't be a deadbeat dad. Make sure that you are paying for your kids and take good care of them, which it sounds like you are, but you're just asking, you know, if you might have to pay more. If your income increases, yeah, you might have to pay more. We got Fly Fishing Jeremy. Good to see you, dude. It's been a while. He says, Chairman Jake, nice catching up with you at the first panel at Ray's event. Ray Fuentes just hit 10,000 subs on YouTube. He posted individual videos of each panel. Can you suggest those videos to this audience? Those panels were great. Cheers. Yeah, so shout out to Ray. For those that don't know, Ray Fuentes is a good friend of mine. We just co-hosted an event there at ETH Denver. It was the night after XRP Community Night. He had fantastic speakers. We were a speaker there. He posted all the panels on his channel, just like Jeremy said. Highly recommend you guys go follow him. He does a lot of hard work and does great edits on all the stuff he puts together. Ray hustles his ass off for his family, and I love him. Love you mucho, Ray. I'll tell you all a story. So this is 2022. I messaged James Rule. He comes up to Dallas for an event. I watched him on YouTube, and I'm watching DAI. I'm watching Brad Kimes. I'm watching Zach Rector. I'm watching all these guys, right? And so James Rule is one of the people that I watch on an infrequent basis. And Ray Fuentes. Fuentes is his last name, Leroy. Anyway, I messaged James, and I'm like, James isn't even going to respond to me. He doesn't know who I am. I'm just a random guy on Twitter that's messaging him. Sure enough, James hits me back in the DM. He's like, yeah, dude, would love to have coffee or lunch when we come up. Looking forward to seeing you. And I'm like, wow, James is cool, man. And it was him. You know, he showed up and he was like, hey, me and Ray are going to go grab breakfast. Would you like to come? I said, absolutely. I'll meet you guys in Dallas. I paid for breakfast with my XRP card at the time. So I got to meet Ray and hang out. And then if I hadn't met Ray that day, none of this exists. Okay. So what transpired after that was Ray, you know, we stayed in touch, and on Twitter, Jimmy Valley put together, you know, the valuation committee and the red folder deal and all of that back in the day. He hits me up in November, late October, early November. And he says, hey, Jimmy's putting together this committee. You're one of the few people that I know that like probably could figure out the math on some of this stuff. Would you like to be a part of it? And I was like, sure. We ended up with like 44 people on the committee. Anyway, Ray's like, hey, if you know anybody else that, you know, you think would be able to provide value, like shoot them my name and we'll coordinate and we'll get them on the committee too. So I had been on Twitter, and Max Avery had been on Twitter with me, and I'm like, Max is sharp. I'm gonna ping Max. Had never met Max in person at that point, and you know, like I didn't know what was going to happen or where it was going to lead or what it was going to look like. But we ended up going down. Him and I rode in a truck together 4 hours both directions to go down to Houston to go see Jimmy and like go to the dinner that they put on in correlation with Max's birthday. And this is like the winter solstice of 22. And anyway, we talked a lot. You get to know somebody pretty good, 4 hours both ways. And I call him up like the next week, and I'm like, hey, I kind of want to do this mastermind thing. And the rest is history, right? So, but if Ray hadn't made that call and that introduction, and followed up with me and stayed in touch, none of this exists. So it's just cool to see like little life events. If you made one small decision differently, like you're in a completely different place 3 to 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later. You know, people talk about like Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, like that's a movie and a book. I feel like my life has been a series of fortunate events. Like I feel very blessed that, you know, you run as hard as you can towards something, and then the next step appears. And people are willing to help. People are so nice. So again, super grateful. I feel very blessed to be in a position to help others, and very grateful to Ray. So shout out to Ray Fuentes. You guys should absolutely go follow him on his channel. Rick Johnson, my man, he says, once upon a crypto, Mr. Rec Turn went to a doctor. The doctor's name, Dr. Neptune. Psychologist Dr. Neptune told his patient, examine your eyes. Man. Yeah, we'll leave all that to the attorneys. We'll see how that works out. We got Mark Woodward. He says, I have a private unlisted association that was set up about a year ago with a bank account. Can I use it to hold my XRP in some way? Thank you. I have a private unlisted association. So I'd assume that that is like a 501c8, very similar to like what fraternities or other associations use. You could put your XRP in that, but it would be a donation. I'm not sure the stipulations on how to manage those assets once it's inside of that entity. You would probably, you know, need to talk with your attorney to figure that out and how it's structured to be able to do it the right way and make sure that you're getting the tax advantages for whatever portion you're willing to donate over there. One of the things that I think is going to be huge for a lot of people post price appreciation, because I think this is going to move way faster than most people think. And once you're over the gift tax threshold, getting stuff out of your personal estate and into other stuff to mitigate taxes is going to be a big thing. Charitable contributions or donations is going to be a big thing. So if you have a private foundation, if you have an association, if you have, you know, some other charitable organization, a donor advised fund or a charitable remainder trust, all those things are going to be great tools to be able to get those assets into some structure that you can affect or create value in other people's lives with, right? As the assets continue to appreciate and spit off cash flow and do other things, you're going to be able to dole that out and make, you know, do good with it. So yeah, I think that that's a great opportunity that you have there. If that's already structured the right way, I would talk to your attorney and your CPA about, you know, what it would look like to hold XRP in that. And again, you can work with Digital Wealth Partners as long as it has an EIN to be able to custody that asset inside of institutional custody and, you know, earn returns or do whatever else you're going to do over there with the team. Rick's got them all tonight. He says, War to Claver. In one of your YouTube shorts, you talked about XRP, how XRP could not exponentially price appreciate by 2030 without the derivatives happening. Please explain for dummies. So, you know, a lot of people are looking for 5, 6, 7-digit XRP, and I think it could absolutely be worth that by 2030. I know, I'm aware of what the market cap would be at that level. Okay, like I know it's pentillions. It's something absurd. So don't, you know, come at me sideways with that. But for that to happen, the level of demand and volume and transactions, it's got to be crazy amounts of volume. And the only thing that I can think of that would suffice for that would be derivatives. Derivatives today notionally are somewhere between 400 trillion and $4 quadrillion in notional value. They don't even know. They don't know the total amount of exposure that's out there for derivatives because every bank participates in them. It's a bet on a leveraged bet using the same treasuries as collateral that they've lent to each other. It's a very unregulated, unaccounted, sketchy market, and they absolutely need to be able to quantify risk in that, and moving it on blockchain would allow them to do it. So that's why I think that the advantage of that is, and then they can make educated bets, but that'll also cause that asset class to expand. Once you can quantify the risk in that and you're making educated bets based on that data versus just kind of flailing willy-nilly, there's going to be a lot more demand for it. So I think you could see derivatives grow to like $10 quadrillion by 2030. And then you can imagine the daily volume on that amount of money. It's pretty absurd. And so that's why I think XRP would go to, you know, $10,000, $100,000, $1 million would be that level of demand that would be required in order to push it there. Work hard, play harder, says Trump is going above and beyond to keep the strait open. He wants to look that way. He is doing everything he can to look like he's trying to help other nations, but I think in reality, like this, man, this seems like a lot of theater to me. And obviously there's real collateral damage. There are people that have lost their lives. There is shrapnel that is sinking to the bottom of the strait in the ocean. I'm not discounting any of those things. Those are all real. I'm praying for those people and their families. I don't want there to be collateral damage or issues. I would prefer that this just stop because I already got what I wanted out of it. Like, this has affected oil. It's going to continue to affect oil. We're going to get the interest rate hike by Japan and everything else is going to roll. I really don't know what they're waiting on or why it's taken so long, but it's coming in the very near future. Like I said, maybe another week they could kick the can on this thing before it's going to roll. Probably less. And, you know, just again, it depends on how things escalate from here. But this is the collapse of America. No, it's not, John. We ain't going anywhere. Most people don't even know that this is going on in Iran. Like, they're going to back the dollar with gold. We're going to be just fine. Not concerned at all. There's a lot of fear mongering out there. I can tell you, we're going to be a-okay. We're backed up. We're doing just fine. So yeah, we've got Crypto One Ron says, I saw the 7 billion had left exchanges just this month. Did Ripple release any this month, and how much is left on the exchanges? I'm not sure what the total amount left on exchanges is, but Ripple did not release any. They re-escrowed 700 million, and they kept the 300 million in excess of that in that wallet. It's still sitting there, so they haven't put it out on the market. So, I mean, we're 4 days into the month here. If they were going to sell some, they normally do. They could sell it tomorrow, though. You know, I don't know. So, I think that maybe they're trying to help orchestrate this supply shock, because it would be good for their business if they sure did. They're now a member of the DTCC. They're able to trade using XRP and RLUSD as collateral there. And I'm hoping that they get a FedMaster account in the near future. Marty, we already went over that one. So let me double check the Discord over here. Living Legacy is always nice enough to send me super chats that I missed. So I'm going to grab these, and then we are going to wrap it up tonight. He's also sent me, China orders its largest oil refiners to suspend diesel and gas exports as war in Iran is escalating. Wow. So China is also now just keeping all the oil and their resources for themselves. So this is going to be even worse for Japan. They're not going to be able to get it from anywhere. He's listed all the ones that I've already done. So I'm going to scroll on down to the bottom. We're going to take 3 more super chats, and then we're going to wrap it up tonight. And again, if I missed your super chat, you know, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on other social media platforms or via email, and we will get it on the next live. Thank you for this super chat. There's no question, but appreciate the donation. Hopefully you're getting value from this. I always forget to say this stuff, but if you wouldn't mind, please like, subscribe, share. It does help the algorithm and the channel grow. And again, if you want more content like this on a more frequent basis and a bit more in-depth analysis and a little more liberty on what I share, you can go into the mastermind. That's at beyondbroke.com. And you can use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar, all that capitalized, get you in for $2 month to month, no contract. Over 18,000 people continue to pay every single month for the value that we provide in that community. And we always want people to feel like they get more value than what they're paying for. So if that sounds cool to you, you want more in real life events than any other community, you want access to private deals, you want access to, all the different channels and jurisdictions. We have people all over the world coming together and putting on little mini events for people that are in their backyard together, that have found each other through the mastermind, which is incredible to see. The culture there, everybody wants to help everyone and lift everybody else up. So if that sounds like a cool spot to be, we would love to have you over there in the mastermind. And we will be locking it down. I haven't said this in a little while, but on the other side of a $10 XRP, we are locking it down. Will be invite only, and the cost to participate will be much, much higher. Cure Pig says, hey, Jake, hope you're doing well. What are your thoughts on DAG? I mean, I like Digital Ascension Group. I'm just kidding. I assume you mean the token. So talked to Ben Jorgensen not that long ago. I saw him up there in New York, and he let me know before it was announced publicly that they were going through that acquisition. AI Squared, I think, is who purchased them. I think it's definitely going to be used. They have an acyclic graph that they use for their blockchain, which isn't really a blockchain, it's an acyclic graph. But the applications that they currently have and contracts that they have with Panasonic and the government and other things that they're doing, I think will lead to, a high level of usage on that network. How long does that take? What price does it go to? What's the total addressable market that they capture? I can tell you the application for Panasonic and what they're doing there. So they do metadata. They're a metadata oracle. So basically, they look at a bunch of different data, and then they analyze that data and provide the metadata above it, which is a big deal. A lot of medical firms, there's a ton of applications and use cases for that type of oracle. And they also have kind of smart data. So there's kind of like if-then statements. So if you have metadata that reports a certain way, then it can be reported in a way that the smart contract needs it to be reported in order to be able to execute based on certain circumstances. So a real world application of this. You have police cars that have a laptop in them, right? Like I'm sure you've been pulled over, you've pulled up next to the police officer and they're running plates on their laptop. That laptop has real-time sensors in it for where the vehicle is at all times. There are a lot of traffic accidents for cops, unfortunately, because they speed through red lights, they do other stuff. But that laptop serves as like a real-time reporting of where they are and what's going on in their environment. And DAG is using that and the metadata on that to be able to refute insurance claims or have things processed the right way when there's incidents with them. So I think that, the metadata that they're able to provide for insurance providers, and then there's, like I said, there's tons of other applications for this deal. So I'm bullish on it. We actually run a node over there at the mastermind on DAG. We have a lot of people that participate in the mastermind staking their DAG with our node. We got Lone Star Bar. They say, hey, Jake, Leo here. Good to see you, dude. Here in the mastermind and Beyond Broke member. Would an irrevocable cable or grantor spendthrift trust that owns the LLC be something that DAG or DWP could set up? And or what are your thoughts, Knights, on that type of trust? Off trust. It's of trust, but off trust. Real or iffy? Irrevocable grantor spendthrift trust. I've seen that. So you can add, I would say this, an irrevocable trust can be an asset protection trust. It can be a dynasty trust. There's a lot of like branding that's been put around that depending on the specific language that's in that document that's structured. Trust law, it is basically a tapestry. Okay, so you can weave it however you want, and you can plug in different provisions that make the most sense for you and your family. A spendthrift provision, which is one of the ones that you mentioned here, basically makes it where your children or the beneficiaries of the trust cannot do anything with the principal that was invested in the trust. They can live off the dividends or the distributions as a beneficiary, but they can't mess up the principal. For families that have children that are older, that aren't quite as financially savvy, or you feel like might make poor choices if they came into a large amount of money quickly, they tend to put that type of provision in there so that the family, their children or their their grandkids or whoever can't mess it up. And they're always going to get that residual off of what was initially invested in the principal as it grows. So it's a great tool. It's not the end all be all. You know, there's a lot of people out there that have branding around certain things and they say this is what everybody needs. I am never of that mindset. There's a lot of tools out there, but there's also a lot of jobs out there. And depending on your job, you might need a different tool. So we look at all the provisions that we can weave in your tapestry and your trust and figure out what's going to work best for you and your family. We use values based planning. We want to understand your long-term goals and what you want this to look like. And then, you know, we'll work through you or work with you on that to make sure that it's done the right way. So that could absolutely be the best thing for you and your family. But until we went through that process to understand, you know, what you want to do, Digital Ascension Group would be who would provide that. You could just go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and schedule a time with Dan, who is our chief architect for estate planning over there at Digital Family Office and Digital Ascension Group. David, he says, can I buy XRP through DWP? Yep, sure can. Cheapest place on the market also. We do 20 basis points with no spread for any amount if you have an account with Digital Wealth Partners. Do I have to use an exchange? Nope. We use Anchorage. They have their own internal brokerage, and that's why it's so cheap. So we don't make any money on trades. You know, again, 20 basis points, no spread. That's the cheapest way to buy XRP, especially in smaller amounts. If you are so much cheaper than exchanges, so exchanges are going to be somewhere between 2 and 5% most of the time after the spread and the fees that they charge. Coinbase One, you know, there's still a spread. They don't charge you a fee if you pay for Coinbase One, which is $100 a month. But the spread alone is sometimes 3%. So yeah, if you want to do the math on that, 20 basis points, 5 times that would be 1%. So we're about 15 times cheaper than most exchanges out there, especially if it's a $1,000, $10,000, $50,000 trade. Once you get up into the $250,000 and higher, there's a lot of OTC desks that are pretty similar to us, but they still have a spread on the asset. So it's actually going to be closer to 1% most of the time what you're paying. Again, would love to work with you. If you have an account over there at DWP, they can absolutely help you buy some more XRP if you need it. We got Kegs. They say, if XRP hits $1,000, what's the most irresponsible purchase you make first? I mean, I plan on buying assets and using it to generate income, borrowing against it, funding life insurance, and doing all the fun stuff that we talk about. But an irresponsible purchase. So in business and in life, like if you played sports, you got trophies. Oh, my wife says, please say a horse. That is number one. I would buy her a horse first. We're already buying some other stuff for her. He said for me that you would make. No, I would buy my wife a horse, which, you know, happy wife, happy life. Mike's got the right idea over here. He says, Patek Philippe. That's where I'm headed. So anyway, where I was headed was in life and in business, you don't get trophies like you do in sports. Okay. Like if you win a championship or a match or whatever it is, you know, you get a medal or you get a trophy. In business or in other ventures, as you get older, what I've seen successful people do is they buy themselves their own trophies. So they'll take, you know, whatever percentage off of something that they made, and then they'll go make a purchase. And every time they look at that purchase, they remember that success that they had. For Kevin O'Leary in particular, those are watches. He collects watches. Every time he has a large business transaction, he will take a portion of the proceeds and go buy a watch with it. That's what I plan on doing. And probably the most irresponsible purchase that I will make post price appreciation. There's been some things on my vision board that I've had for a long time. I don't really consider a jet irresponsible because of the amount of depreciation that we're going to be able to use with that to be able to offset taxes for the business and other stuff. But you could probably call that irresponsible. But yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of utility to a $500,000 watch. You know, like you're going to wear it. Maybe you're going to wear it. That's a really expensive watch. But you know, I would like to commemorate, you know, reaching 100 billion in AUM with something significant. I think that's a pretty cool milestone for what we were doing, and I do think that that will happen this year with price appreciation. So after the horse, there'll be a watch. Anything else? Well, yeah, we probably ought to go ahead and wrap it up here. I'm going to see if there's any more super chats and grab one. A lot of people with the $5 super chat just saying thank you. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate everybody that do the super chats. I try to make sure I get to all of them. If I missed you for whatever reason, you know, don't hesitate to reach out on other social media platforms. My wife will be awesome and she will print them out. I will have them here in front of me on Monday night. Hopefully we see Japan come out and raise interest rates tonight. If that's the case, we will see everything start to unfold in the very near future. If they do not do that, maybe we'll get an announcement from Ripple over the next 24 hours. Again, that's just hearsay on the open market. We'll see what actually plays out or not. Hopefully they get a Fed master count. I broke down the whole LLC at the beginning of this. If you're joining later, go back and watch the front end of that. If you want to work with us on the LLC and living trusts and all the other things that we do, you can go to digitalfamilyoffice.io and use the code 50OFF50OFFDAG LLC. Get you everything end to end on that entity creation to be able to manage your digital assets the best way possible. If you want to join the mastermind, we would love to see you there. Again, more in real life events, fantastic culture, a lot more information there. We do multiple town halls per week. We have professionals in there all the time talking about estate planning, insurance, you know, lifestyle. We had a guy talk about peptides not that long ago for health and improvement. We have a very broad scope of people in the community that have fantastic information. A lot of very high level professionals there. So go check that out. Beyondbroke.com. Use the code BeyondBroke, all capitalized, the number 1, and then MO like Mary Oscar each the first month for $2. And then last but not least, if you do want your assets managed over there at Digital Wealth Partners, access to institutional custody, returns on your XRP, lines of credit against it, and much, much more with the advisors over there. Or you just want somebody to talk to help you like make an allocation and manage it the right way. Just go over to digitalwealthpartners.net, go to the contact us form, and they would love to chat with you. And so with that, we'll wrap it up. I hope you guys have a wonderful Wednesday, a wonderful week, and we will see you on the next one.